Hello, good morning, everyone. We are going to start. Thank you so much for your patience here in the room and also online. This is the third and last day of the forum. We will have two panels today. And this first one is going to tackle summer energy poverty, and the second one is going to look at the global just transition. So and then for the ones that have registered, we're going for the Powerful Encounters exhibition at the EESC. So that's today. I'm really sad that this is coming to an end, but I think like our last day is full of exciting panelists and the power and the exhibition. So yeah, really looking forward to it. So thanks a lot, and I'm just gonna give the floor to Emilie for this panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for your patience. It's not easy moderating hybrid panels, so be kind today. I think you won't be regretting that you came because we have some really interesting speakers. And I'm going to give a little bit of introduction to the topic before I introduce them and I give them the floor. So this panel is about summer energy poverty, which is a topic that many people know, but maybe we've been focusing less on with the coalition because we've been making more recommendations related to winter and cold. But heat waves are becoming a bigger and bigger problem in Europe. We estimate that about 20% of households struggle to stay cold in the summer and cool in the summer. And heat waves are causing an average of 48,000 deaths a year, which is a lot, and it's only going to be growing. Welcome, Simon. Please join us. So Simon is here in person, and we have 3 speakers online. So we need to be dealing with this risk both for immediate adaptation and also long-term resilience. But because it's a very unevenly distributed risk and because there's a lot of variety in the way that people experience it, it's also important to map what kind of populations experience this problem, how we can develop solutions that are both accessible, adaptable, and low energy or like less energy intensive. So with all the different speakers here, we're going to really think about the health equity aspects of summer heat and energy poverty, and think of what recommendations we can make both at the European level, at the national level, and more at local levels, and how cities and municipalities can also intervene. So yes, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speakers. First, we're going to have Sarah Coupechoux, who is the European Policy Manager at Fondation Abbé Pierre, which deals with homelessness, precarity, and housing issues in France. And she has a big background in human rights and social justice. So this is what she's bringing to the panel. Simon is an engineer who's been working in a lot of different EU projects that maybe he can tell you more about. And he has been working at EURAC Research since 2010, where he's contributing to implementing technical and economic analyses of projects, and notably one which is called Cool Life, which is about passive cooling methods. And then we have Roberta from Italy, who is working on climate change mitigation and initiatives linked to empowering local communities, reducing poverty, and promoting regional development and alignment with EU policy. And she focuses on energy communities and energy efficiency. And we're going to think a little bit about, in the context of Italy, which is a country where it gets very hot as well, how that can be one solution or one way to reduce energy poverty. And then Panagiota Kotsila is a senior researcher at the UAB, the Autonomous University of Barcelona, and leader at 5-year ERC project called Embrace, which looks at how migrants' climate health vulnerability is shaped and what impacts it. And she's been doing a lot of participatory research with really interesting methodologies to analyze those risks and think of solutions together with migrants, if I'm not wrong, both in Berlin and Barcelona. and she's a researcher in the Barcelona Urban Environmental Justice Lab, which looks a lot at issues of green gentrification and how policy that can have the intent to bring solutions can also sometimes lead to more inequity, especially for migration and racialized groups. So yes, that's my introduction. Thank you very much again for being here. And without further ado, I'm going to give the floor first to Sarah, I think, who's online for a short presentation. All the speakers are going to have some presentations, and then we'll have some questions and also questions from the audience. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Emilie, and thank you for the invitation. First of all, I would like to apologize because I should be with you today and it was impossible, so I'm online. Sorry for that. I will be short. I think that maybe I have 5, 6 minutes. That's it. So I try to do it really quickly. So my presentation is about a campaign that we lead at French level on Kitter's home on summer energy poverty. This campaign was based on a report named the Kitter's The State Remains Ice Cold. What was the aim of this study? It was to put the issue of heat in the middle of the discussion and the debate on energy poverty, and to get out the idea that energy poverty is only based on winter comfort and the cold and the problem of heating the buildings, but the fact that it's also something in the summer comfort, because there is a climate change, and we know that there is more and more heat waves during the summer, and it's important that housing can face this problem in our cities. So what we found in this survey was that there was in 2020 26% more people living in excessively warm homes than in 2013. Why this date? Because we had a survey on housing in France from the statistical office did in 2013, and we have a new one in 2020. 37% of low-income households suffer more from heat in their home than the richer one. 27% of tenants suffer of heat also compared to homeowners, and the proportion of low-income households owning an air conditioner is less than that of world of households. And at least 5,000 people died as a result of heat in 2023. So it's a huge problem that it's not in the public debate for the moment in France. That was not in the public debate in France, and it was important to highlight this point. Just some little point. We, as I said, we know now that more we are poor, the more we suffer from heat in our home. You have little figures, sorry, it's in French. 37% of poor people suffer from heat in their home, and what I said is the tenants are more touched by this problem. And also, we have to say that in 10 years, it was, as I said, it is an increase of 26% of people suffering it. I put a testimony of someone on the slide. You can see after that. So this graph show you the numbers of people owning less than €1,000 are more touched by heat, suffering from heat in their home. And at your right, it's a graph showing you that when you live in urban areas, it's also worse. And this is urban, not poor, but middle class, low middle class. And this is rural, low and low middle class. So you see that the low income is touching more the people from suffering eating, and in the rural and urban, it's also the case. What does it mean? Keter housing for us is housing based in really without green areas around the building, and this is a housing with poor insulation and a lack of ventilation. And we know that a large part of people living in bad housing for cold are also suffering of heat in their home. 3 on 4 people in that case. Of course, why urban areas are more touched than rural areas is because of the I'm sorry because I don't know how to say that in English, but of a bubble, the eating bubble, we can say maybe in the town. The less there is a green space, and the more there is heat. But I know that you know that, of course. The impact on health and social consequences are really important because we know that there is a lot of deaths during the heating waves in France. For example, as I said, there was 5,000 people dying dead during the summertime in 2023, and there was 20,000 people going to emergency services because of it. The person the most touched are the older one, woman in pregnancy, and people with illness and kids, young kids, and they are most vulnerable with this. For the moment, there is nothing really done at national level on that topic. We would like to have more awareness, but the progress is really timid, if we can say. The renovation policy is focused on reducing energy consumption, decarboning, to maintain a minimal temperature, and we don't have anything on the maximum temperature. For example, there is not so much things in the diagnostic for the building. And there is still regulatory and property related obstacles, particularly in collective housing, where you have to manage all the collective homeowners in the building, and it's difficult to take decisions. As a result, 70% of tenants are affected, and it's really difficult to find a way to touch them with public policies. Here is a testimony, but I don't want to take too much time, and I think that you will share the slides after, Emilie, so you can read it after. And the consequence is also the fact that the air conditioning is growing up really fast. As you can see, 75% more primary residences have now more with air conditioning between 2013 and 2020. So this is not a climate sustainable way to cool the house, and we think that there is more passive action to have on buildings, and it's more important to include it in the renovation policies. Another testimony. And just to conclude and to don't be too long, so we would like to include systematically work to adapt the heat waves into energy renovation and support schemes subsidized by the state, because for the moment we don't have subsidies targeting the heat solutions. To increase the grant for renovation and have extra cost of adaptation. Include the notion of heat in housing decency criteria, because we have a law in France that include energy poverty in the concept of decent housing, and we think that we have to include also a maximum temperature to have a decent housing, and to adapt the legislative rules and rethink the cities to combat urban heat islands, if I can say. Here is my presentation. I hope it was not too long, and I will be happy to answer to your question.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I hope you can hear me. It was perfect, thank you, and it was really, really interesting. And I'm sure we can go more in depth into some of the things you talked about with questions, both from the audience and some that I've prepared. I wanted to give the floor next to Panagiota, if you're ready for giving us your presentation. So as I said, Panagiota is a researcher in urban environmental justice mainly. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Let me just do this right. Okay, can you see my slide? Yeah, great. So like you said, I'm going to just introduce briefly the results from some pilot studies that we've done. Mostly today, I will talk about Barcelona, although we've also worked in Berlin, and we have 4 more cities in Europe that we're going to look at this issue of what shapes vulnerability to heat for migrants, people with migrant backgrounds in European cities. So you've talked a little bit about the impacts of heat on health, just very briefly, maybe to emphasize how it's not only the direct impacts of heat on people's health, like heat strokes, exhaustion, or death and mortality, but also heat is destabilizing ecosystemic functions, causing indirect impacts like the spread of infectious diseases like West Nile virus or dengue that we've seen also to rise across Europe, but also increasing the potential and frequency of forest fires like we've seen in my home country, Greece, in the last years. It's also impacting the capacity of people to perform everyday tasks. It also impacts occupational health, how people experience heat at work, and their capacity to perform care work, to care for others during their everyday life. So it really impacts many different aspects of life, apart from the time that we spend at home or apart from the direct impacts it may have on our health. These graphs just show that the amount of hours where outdoors activity would be safe in Europe are decreasing. So the amount of hours where physical activity outdoors will be a problem or a threat to health are increasing, and not just in Southern Europe, but throughout all over Europe. And these graphs show that basically the risk for health-related impacts of health is projected to be greater for women than for men in the next decades. Now, when we're thinking about heat vulnerability and heat injustice, I think we need to think of them, these aspects, as part of historical and ongoing oppressions, intersectional oppressions, I would say, based on different positions that we have as subjects, right? So we know, for example, that social isolation and social marginalization are drivers of vulnerability to heat. So usually when we look at especially health studies that look at the vulnerability to heat from a health perspective, these studies are based on health data. And health data usually are disaggregated by population characteristics like age or gender, sometimes income level, sometimes neighborhood or the location where a person lives. So we could see how, and in all these studies, you see how, age, for example, is a very big thing, no, is a factor of vulnerability. More older people experience the impacts of heat than younger. But there's not enough social data in these types of studies to understand how and why social isolation, for example, and marginalization is a driver for heat vulnerability. And this has been explained through other types of studies, more sociological and anthropological studies. We've seen how, like we heard in the presentation before, outdated and non-resilient housing is also a factor of heat vulnerability. Neighborhoods that lack support infrastructures like green areas or climate shelters or cooled public buildings or public transport that also has some form of cooling also is a driver of vulnerability to heat. And what we've seen so far is that these characteristics of bad housing, lousy infrastructures in the neighborhoods are mostly suffered in segregated areas or neighborhoods. This has been mostly studied in North America. So we're talking about neighborhoods that have been historically segregated and separated from, separated Black populations from white populations, for example. But we've also seen this increasingly so in Europe with poor urban neighborhoods or neighborhoods that are segregated with, including a lot of migrant populations being, facing these characteristics far more intensely than other neighborhoods that are more white and affluent. Why am I focusing on migrants? Why do I think it's important to talk about this? First of all, a recent study showed that migrants in general, globally, internationally, are more likely to suffer the negative health impacts of heat. And this, again, is based on health data, right? But we also know from studies that combine, social analysis, sociopolitical analysis, and health, that racism and climate change interact. They're two things that happen at the same time and have disproportionate effects on the lives of minoritized people, both within countries and when comparing the global north with the global south. And we've also seen how, even though we talk about adaptation, inclusive adaptation, including local community in how we do adaptation, we've seen, and especially in Europe, that migrants are rarely seen as part of these climate-concerned local communities or population of concern that planners will turn to get their opinions, or that policies will be shaped to address their problems. And this is why I focused, I'm focusing on migrant populations. And now I'm going to just give you a glimpse of the findings from a neighborhood in Barcelona, Raval, that has more than 37% of its residents are global south migrants. Here you can see a little map showing the projected mortality risk from heat, and the circle shows where that neighborhood is. So it's quite high on the mortality risk from heat. Generally, it's a neighborhood with one of the lowest disposable incomes and life expectancies, one of the highest energy poverty rates. It has high density of old buildings with very poor thermal performance. Again, also to stress, very high percentage of the residents are renting, they're not owners. Also, green spaces are scarce in Raval, and also it has experienced the highest number of tropical nights in the city in the year 2022, meaning nights during which temperature did not fall below 26 degrees. So really nights where it's very hard to get rest and sleep. Here, this is a study from the metropolitan area of Barcelona, which they consider socioeconomic and environmental aspects to define heat vulnerability. And Raval, also here in the circle, scores one of the highest, most vulnerable neighborhoods. So what did we do there? We used participatory photography, photo voice, as a methodology which basically gives people the chance to describe what they think, what their problems are, what their solutions that they can see is through photographs. So we define a question. In our case, it was, where or in what situations did you feel more or less comfortable during a heat wave? And the participants gave us photos and we analyzed those together. And this is kind of the summary of the findings, which I'm going to very quickly go through. First of all, we find that labor precarity and housing precarity act together as one form of urban heat injustice. So, like I said, in the Raval, but also in general, the most disadvantaged groups are living in flats that are not well insulated and not energy efficient. They are renting, so they can't demand much change in that, or they can't, themselves invest in improving their flats. In Benaval specifically, a lot of people live in flats that only have one window because they're flats that have been broken down to smaller flats. So ventilation is really an issue here. The last decades of touristification in the city of Barcelona, like in many others, especially in the historical city center, have caused rent increases that make affordability a very big challenge for them. But also they're facing discriminatory attitude from homeowners and from real estate companies, where, for example, from a study in 2015, out of more than 400 calls, more than 70% were denied to be given the opportunity to rent a flat because their name showed that they had some migrant background, or because their accent gave away migrant background. So they're even denying the opportunity to rent a place. Moreover, rental contracts require formal employment and residence documents, or else you cannot get it. So then a lot of people end up renting or sub-renting, and they have no protection then of their rights of their as tenants. What people told us is really that during the summer, the home becomes unbearable, uninhabitable, somewhere where it's not really a shelter. Your home is no longer a shelter. It's somewhere where you don't want to be. And I found that very shocking. And I leave some quotes. They also told us that even if they had an air conditioning in the house, they wouldn't run it because of the energy cost. Even running the fan sometimes is a problem economically, especially during the last years of the energy crisis. And these aspects are also very gendered. A lot of women that stay at home to do a lot of the housework and do a lot of the cooking and the cleaning tell us that they cannot even look for relief outside the home, whether that is in private spaces like shopping malls that are air-conditioned or open public spaces like parks. And we come to the second big set of findings, which concerns public space. So when the home becomes uninhabitable, people have to see themselves obliged to spend time outdoors, especially in the nighttime, but also during the day, especially when you have kids. What happens is that green areas are scarce, and the little green that is there is often eaten up by restaurants and bars that use it as their, outdoors terrace. So consuming something becomes or feels like it's necessary for enjoying these spaces. Also, they told us about how many municipal pools are very expensive, and looking into it, we found that Barcelona has averagely the most expensive entrances for municipal pools in Spain. And there's no discounts for residents versus tourists, right? So people that pay taxes and live in the city have to pay the same entrance, and there's no discounts for families with a lot of kids and so on. Now, the city of Barcelona also has a network of climate shelters that in the last 4 or 5 years have been activated across the city, whether those are existing buildings like libraries or new infrastructures, new parks, for example, etc. What we found was that not many people were aware of those infrastructures as heat shelters. Also, that many of those are closed during the month of August, because it's normal that during August everybody leaves for holidays, but those who can't afford it, a lot of which are migrant residents, have to stay in the city, and they don't have those infrastructures available. And most interestingly, a lot of those places, they told us, don't feel welcoming enough, because they're not places where they used to go before. They're not places where they feel like they can go in big groups and have big chats. They feel that culturally they are excluded. There were more findings about public space, especially concerning neighborhood density, where, when you have to use public space to find relief, there's a lot of tensions regarding which uses will be done where. And for example, when you have to be outside in the night because your flat is too warm, other people complain that this causes noise when they have to sleep with their windows open, etc. So we see a lot of tension also in the neighborhood during the summer because of these reasons. To close, I just wanted to bring some hopeful findings or interesting findings in terms of solutions. People say that they find relief in spaces that they've made their own, such as communal gardens or buildings such as Antigua Massana, that was an ex-art school that they have taken over and used as a place of gathering, solidarity, and connection. And I bring this in as a finding. I think it's important to think not just about how to create spaces from above, saying as a municipality or the state in general, but also to look at where is it that vulnerable groups spend most of their time, where is it that they find relief, and supporting those spaces because they have already gained their trust and support and they feel them like their own. So starting from places like those where people already feel empowered and welcome. And I think I'm going to leave it here. This is like a bit of a summary of what I've talked about. I don't want to take more time. Thank you.
Great. So I don't know if you can hear, but you're getting some claps from the audience. Unfortunately, the camera doesn't turn, but this was really interesting. Thank you very much. And for me as well, because I used to live in Barcelona, so I get a lot of reminders of what I saw there. If you don't mind, Roberta, I was going to give you the floor first, but I think I will let Simon speak so that we have a bit more of a balance between live and online. If that's okay with you?
It's fine.
Oh, yeah? Okay. Then Roberta, if that's okay, I'll give the floor to you, and then we'll have Simon present. Cool. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me and see me. My name is Roberta Ranieri. I work with AESS, there is an energy agency, as project assistant for the POWERUP project. It's a pleasure to be here today and share all the progress we've made with an exciting initiative in the south of Italy, in the Campania region. Our focus there is on creating an energy community. As you know, an energy community is a group of individuals or organizations that come together to produce, share, and consume renewable energy. In this progress, we found out that many people experiencing energy poverty not only lack the financial means to invest in photovoltaic system, but they also face significant barriers such as legal, technical, and consultancy costs that make it difficult to establish an energy community. And additionally, there is a limited understanding of renewable energy sources and the benefits that they can bring. So after years of effort and gaining insight into the local area to overcome these obstacles, our local partner, UXA, which is a municipal office covering 4 municipalities, has taken on the responsibility of setting up the energy community and providing the photovoltaic systems. But however, for us, it was important that the community feels involved and valued and engaged in this process. That's why we are working hard to ensure that the approach remains inclusive and fosters a sense of ownership and collaboration. One of the key areas we've been focusing on is raising awareness and educating the local population about energy and environmental issues. As part of the POWERUP project, we organized a series of workshops with citizens and people facing energy poverty and also businesses and the local administration. These events have been crucial in helping people understand that green technologies, particularly renewable energy, are not just a distant luxury solution. The workshops were held in key locations in the municipalities and followed a mixed format, combining presentations with interactive discussions and dialogues with the participants. We focused on practical topics, not only related to energy communities or renewable energy sources, but also on more interactive issues, immediate issues, such as how to save energy at home, how to better manage utility bills, and also how to protect themselves from scams related to energy providers, for example. In this regard, our partners for the workshops were associations specialized in addressing energy poverty. This organization have a strong presence on the territory and a deep understanding of the specific challenges that the local community face. So they helped us design the workshop in a way that was both practical and directly relevant for the participants. In response to the feedback we received, we've realized that there is a significant need for a dedicated information service that people can turn to for support on energy-related issues. So, in collaboration with the local municipalities and our partners, we are now exploring the possibility of setting up an information desk dedicated on the energy-related issues. From understanding bills to learning about renewable energy sources. So we will also use this desk as a resource for information about the energy community in our region, explaining how the individuals can join both as prosumers or consumers. And we believe that this initiative could make a huge difference in helping people make informed decisions about their energy use. And we will also protect them from the challenges they face. As we continue this work, our ultimate goal is to create a model that is inclusive and sustainable and directly benefits those who need it the most. The response from the community so far has been quite positive, so we are excited to continue collaborating with the municipality and our local partners to ensure that this project has a long-lasting impact. Thank you for your attention. I hope it was good.
Thank you very much, Roberta. Some clapping again. It's very interesting to hear from your very direct experience, so thank you for sharing that with us. And I'm going to give the floor to Simon for his own presentation. Yeah. Sorry? Oh, she just did her presentation. Is there's maybe an issue with the slides, if you can hold on 1 minute.
Here, it's fine.
Yeah? Okay. Thanks everyone for your patience. The technical issues today are accumulating. Almost there. Yes, amazing. Okay, those online can't see them yet, but here we can. Perfect. Okay, great. Well, go ahead, Simon.
Merci. Yeah, first of all, I'm very sorry for being late today. I experienced what are traffic jams in the center of Brussels near the European Commission headquarters. That's really impressive. Okay, now, good morning again. So welcome to the presentation about the LifeSet CoolLife project. It's a clean energy transition project named Open Source Tools to Face the Increase in Building Space Cooling Demand. We slightly touch also the topic of summer energy poverty, and I would like to provide you a very brief overview of the project and explain how we touch the topic of summer energy poverty. Next slide, please. Okay. Sorry. Okay, maybe okay, no, I can see them there. That's fine, no worry. Okay, now as main outcome of the project, we have two tools. So the CoolLife tool and also the CoolLife Knowledge Hub, which basically are already online, so they are free for you to be experienced. And both tools mainly have the goal to be so user-friendly, to be used also by citizens, and among others, also to explore, let's say, economically suitable space cooling solutions, especially in the residential sector, like, for example, passive cooling, natural cooling, free cooling, and nature-based solutions. Next slide, please. Yeah, here basically we see a very small chart which should explain how the CoolLife tool works. So it's a tool mainly for, let's say, technicians, like urban planners, for example. In fact, here under number 1, you can select an area which goes from a hectare level up to the entire European Union to detect, first of all, the space cooling demand of a certain area. Then next, once you have detected the space cooling demand, then you basically can select different options to face this space cooling demand, like, for example, passive cooling solutions or others. And then we come to step 4 here, which is a very important part related to summer energy poverty, because we then provide the CAPEX and the OPEX. So we then provide indication about capital expenditures and operative expenditures on how to face the detected space cooling demand. And here also I would like to repeat something which colleague before already said. Here we see also from case studies in the project, among others from the region I'm from South Tyrol, from Bolzano, that even if an air conditioner is installed, then in this case, at least in Bolzano, 15% of the persons do not use it anymore because electricity costs are so high. Then we come also to another part of the tool, which is very important, related to summer energy poverty. It's called comfort, lifestyle, and user behavior. This part then provides the user, let's say, behavioral aspects of the selected area. And among others, we analyze also the lifestyle and user behavior influence related to space cooling energy consumption. Then under point 5, the tool provides also indications regarding policies, legislations, regulations for the selected area and the chosen intervention. And point 6 is a little bit out of scope here for this summer study. But let's say here we speak about demand side management and demand response. Next slide, please. Yeah, basically this is a very small chart explaining the main part of the project. And to see basically below where we have the part of comfort, lifestyle, and user behavior, where we analyze the consumer behavior of the persons in the field of space cooling, especially in households. And this then goes as a knowledge to a CoolLife tool to be provided to the planners. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is a chart which has been used especially at the very beginning of the project to understand where we start from and where we would like to end up. And especially related to summer energy poverty, we have the lack of knowledge on space cooling, comfort, lifestyle, and user behavior, which I was impressed how less explored it is so far. Then a lack of awareness on unconventional, innovative space cooling solutions. As you might know, more than 99% of the cooling technologies installed so far are vapor compression solutions, or the conventional ones, but there are many, many other alternatives which can be utilized to face the space cooling demand also in an economical, feasible way. And then last but not least, we have the lack of knowledge concerning barriers and drivers for innovative space cooling solutions. This has also to do with the fact that the space cooling market is a very mature market, and basically the citizen has difficulties to get offered options to vapor compression. Most times this is offered as a conventional solutions, and no options are provided to the citizens to face space cooling. Next slide, please. Yeah, here I would like just to focus on these two arrows you see below, because in CoolLife we have a knowledge transfer process where we, from experts, provide knowledge to citizens especially, where you see the last arrow, where we have the social and innovation experts, and these end users then, among others, are civil society, represented by renewable energy communities, citizen energy communities, and municipalities. Next slide, please. Yeah, basically this chart briefly represents the ecosystem of the project, where we have the main partners, the CoolLife tool testing sites, and also the social innovation parts. And we are now in the phase of this CoolLife tool testing, because since just a few weeks, the CoolLife tool and the Knowledge Hub is online, and where you see then these triangles, we have allocated the CoolLife testing parts, and we get feedback also from citizens and from households. And there, I have to say, since we have an energy crisis, and electricity prices rise significantly in Europe, the problem of summer energy poverty increased a lot. Like the colleague said before, and I need to repeat again, even if there is a space cooling solution implemented, then they don't use it anymore because the electricity bill explodes. Next slide, please. Yeah, so basically we come to a conclusion of this presentation saying that in CoolLife we push for natural, passive, free cooling and nature-based solutions, because especially those solutions are economically feasible and also save CO2 emissions. Next slide, please. And with that, I would like to end. And if you have questions, I'm glad to answer. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Simon, for presenting this. I just have actually a question, because we started with 20 minutes late, but I'm unsure at what time can we end the panel. We can... Okay, because I'd prepared some questions, but I think it's interesting then if the audience has any questions to leave first the floor for anyone who might want to ask one. So does anyone have any questions for the speakers? Yes, thank you. Online, if you cannot hear, please wave, but you should normally hear us.
Yeah, William Baker, Field Poverty Research Network. I'm aware there's a lot of research evidence on the health impact of cold homes, and it just gives the impression there isn't nearly so much on health impacts of warm homes, and sort of questions, I'd be interested to know. We've heard obviously migrants and perhaps and suggested that women are more vulnerable to heat-related morbidity, but which particular health conditions have been identified as being related to summer heat? How long-lasting are they? Which groups are most vulnerable? And is there a role for the health sector, for instance, recognising that people who are coming then with particular conditions might benefit from, say, improvements to their homes or whatever, or other measures? It might be perhaps for Sarah and Panagiota.
Exactly. I was going to ask, did you hear the question properly, or would you like me to repeat it? Yes? Then, yeah, if you'd like to offer a reply.
I could go first with what I mean. There's a lot of studies on the impacts of heat on health, and let's say these aspects of sensitivity that make you more sensitive to heat, like preconditions, having cardiovascular disease or respiratory disease makes it more risky for people when they're exposed to heat to have an episode of, say, a heart attack or a heat stroke, because they're not able to breathe properly or their heart doesn't work properly, etc. But these studies, I haven't seen anything focused particularly on homes, because they're looking at the impacts of heat independently of where you are. You might be outside. Of course, a lot of them look at people that work outdoors, like outdoors workers, or people that do physical activity outside a lot. So this has been, I don't know if you've seen the latest Lancet, the Lancet on climate and health. There's a EU level report and a global one. It's a publication that kind of resumes the impacts of climate change on health and focuses a lot on heat. But what I wanted to say here is that, because you mentioned long-term effects as well, I want to stress the indirect effects. I'm just going to tell you a story of an old Pakistani man who lived in a second-floor flat with no elevator. And because his home was too hot, he wasn't feeling well there, right? And he was experiencing energy poverty. His electricity was cut, so he couldn't put on the fan. So he decided to go outside. But because he's elderly, he misstepped and fell on the stairs and died. Would you assign this death as heat attributable? I mean, he didn't die because it was too hot for him, right? He died because he was trying to find relief. And we can have a lot of these stories, like people who experience health impacts like anxiety and mental health problems, that they can't sleep for nights. And so there's a lot of indirect impacts, is what I'm trying to say, that are hard to document, because usually we look at, say, excess deaths. How many excess deaths do we have during a heat wave that are above the normal number of deaths that we have? Or we might look at specific health records and see, this person came to the hospital with this condition. This was during a heat wave, so most probably was related. So I think there's a lot more detail to be studied there. And I think I'm going to leave the rest maybe for Sarah to answer, because I don't know if I covered it all. Thank you.
So I'm not a health expert, but regarding the question of housing, I think that we sometimes have difficulties to prove the direct link, and I think that it's I joined the remark of Panagiota on that point. The direct link between the housing condition and the health consequences. So sometimes, for example, you can have humidity in the house. Does it provoke directly the asthma of the kids? We don't really know, because there is certainly other factors, but we know that it's worse with humidity in the house. So I think that we did in Abbé Fondation a report on the effect on energy poverty on people and bad housing on the health of people. And I think that there is no much study on warm housing effect on health directly. I'm not sure that there is a link direct between the both, but we know that people suffer of headache, respiration, difficulties to breathe, and things like that, and it leads to an increase of demand in the emergency services. So, of course, we can have a debate on academic link between the both, but we know that there is some link in among other factors, probably. And maybe just a point on the importance to include the health sector to our recommendation and campaign. And I think that, of course, we have here for energy poverty, winter or summer, whatever, we have a public health issue, of course, and more than the health sector, we have to take aware all institution and government, national or EU institution, of the fact that we are not just speaking about comfort, we are speaking about health directly.
Yeah, thank you very much for those answers. Simon is going to add something as well to your question.
I will not really answer, just a small ad. Basically, past summer, we wrote a local, provincial project proposal in the field of cooling, which is the name Coolst. And there, as a request, it was asked to investigate the relation between health and cooling. And I'm a little bit surprised to hear that there's a lot of research regarding that, because we searched in literature, scientific literature, and at least I was not able to find so much about that. And I can confirm what the colleague said, we found also about respiratory illnesses. Then, to our surprise, and not well investigated yet, is the connection between heat waves and psychological illnesses. And this, at least was said to us, is a field to come, and there are investigations ongoing, but not much results yet. And then also what I want to highlight is that the colleagues here from France and from other countries and from Spain, they might have data about mortality from heat waves, but they're not given for all countries, and also not at a lower level, it's a provincial level or regional level. At least where I came from, we asked then the local health association if they could provide these numbers, and they told us we have no idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, please.
My name is Claire. Thanks. My name is Claire Simpson, and I work at the City of Brussels in the climate team, and especially on the topic of how to adapt the city to urban heat islands and heat waves in the summer. And I was wondering, well, first of all, thanks for all of your presentations, because I think you gave us a lot of insight on how to adapt the city and make it more resilient in an inclusive way. But I was wondering if you had specific examples of bad examples of how cities try to adapt and it was not inclusive, and on the contrary, good examples of policies that you would like to recommend us to implement.
Thank you very much. I think this is a great question. I saw that there's another hand raised, so I'm going to take both questions and maybe give a chance to see if they are cross-cutting or not.
Well, yes, thanks for the presentations, really interesting and insightful. So I'm particularly interested in energy communities, and what the Panagiota was talking about, how communities are like self-organizing in order to empower themselves and make themselves get for themselves the use of spaces in order to tackle a little bit the effects of this heat energy poverty. So I think it's interesting sometimes to link like sometimes energy communities, we tend to think about them in a certain way, like cooperatives, economical kind of organizations. And sometimes it's interesting to see and link, these kind of experiences with maybe how an energy community should more look like. So maybe it's kind of a commentary. I would like if you could comment a little bit about it, maybe Panagiota, and maybe also Roberta, that you were talking about the energy communities work you've been doing.
Thank you very much. So we have two questions, one about good and bad examples of what cities have done to answer heat effects, and the other one about energy communities. I open the floor. Please feel free to unmute yourselves and give answers. And Simon.
I could try to answer that on urban, because I think her question was more, the first person's question was more on urban planning and resilience more generally, not just about heat. So just very quickly, and I think if you're interested about this, you can go on the BCNUEJ website and look for more, because we've dedicated years and years of research on this. So summarizing, I think the whole idea of making cities greener and healthier, including this idea of resilience or adaptation to climate change, has become a new paradigm in urbanism, which is great in some ways. We all know that there's benefits to of this, no, to come, and it's very necessary. On the other hand, it has been very much been rolled into like a cooperative practice, right, of making cities or neighborhoods more desirable, because green is the new, the new luxury, right? What people are looking for now is to live in green neighborhoods, to live in homes that are well insulated and, they're well ventilated and they don't use a lot of energy. So this is what people want. And if you let this in the free market, whoever can afford it will afford it, and whoever can't. So like, that's kind of the summary of it. Maybe to give a bit of an answer on what could be done better. One aspect is really establishing anti-displacement tools, because what we're seeing is that as neighborhoods get better and more attractive, people get displaced, right? This is what we call green gentrification or climate gentrification. So how can we protect against it? By protecting access to housing. And by anti-displacement tools, there is a whole report actually that we have on the website. There's not enough time to talk about all of them now, but we can talk about inclusionary zoning. We could talk about defending, for example, single-family homes. We could talk about the right to return for people that were displaced from their neighborhoods because of the gentrification process. We could obviously talk about rent controls and rent subsidies, taxes applied to then use this money towards affordable homes or social housing. We could even also talk about the process of urban planning, right? Opening and making it really participatory and democratic at the city level, to the extent that cities, have their jurisdiction on things. But things like rezoning, enhancing rural agriculture, establishing things like community land trusts, and a lot of other little tools that we've seen work in different places. They could become a new paradigm, right, of how we imagine equitable or just adaptation in cities. And just very quickly to reply to the other question, because then I have to go. I'm sorry, I thought we would be over by 10:30, so I have to leave this panel. I'm so sorry. The question on alternative energy communities, I really like your reflection, whoever it was in the audience, because I do think that there is a very top-down kind of imaginary of what adaptation can look like, or what energy justice can look like. And we often imagine it in those terms, right? Different economic structures or infrastructure, hard infrastructures. And sometimes we see that how people deal with these things at the everyday level also can be a part of this, new imaginary of adaptation. To make it more specific, the same happens with sustainability. We talk about sustainability like establishing new bike lanes, right? But then there's a lot of people who just gather metal scrap from the bins, and they are doing work for sustainability, which is informal, unrecognized, and unprotected. The same thing with adaptation. We imagine adaptation being this great new park, or solar panels everywhere, but we don't think adaptation is to gather around in a squatted community garden where you have planted your plants, and we have, you have decided collectively to install a little pool for the kids to freshen up in the summer. We don't think of that as adaptation. We think of it more as survival or, activism simply. But I think we should think of these things together, because both of the spaces that I talked about in Raval very briefly, they were not made as a reaction to heat or heat waves. They were made out of the necessity of people to come together and support each other. But from that came also the effect, or the positive effect, on heat protection. And I think there's a lot of those practices that we need to look more into. So yeah, thank you for your questions, and I'm really, really sorry I have to go.
Thank you so much for your answers. I'm really glad that you could join us today. I think we learned a lot, and I really encourage everyone to look into the research that the Barcelona Urban Environmental Justice Lab is doing, because there's a lot more to be learned from there. So if you have to go, don't worry, we'll be closing the panel very soon. But thank you very much for being here, Panagiota, and see you soon. We only have a couple of more minutes, but if Roberta or Sarah, you want to add an answer to the questions, or if you also have to leave, I would understand because we started late.
I just wanted to add that our process with the energy community is quite different from others, because in so many projects, they use a different kind of approach. They use a bottom-up approach. We tried for several years, but it was very difficult for us to engage citizens and engage people in energy poverty. That's why now we are using a kind of top-down approach. It is important in this process that we also engage those sections of our populations. For us, it was very important to engage people with a more direct approach. So we basically are using the door-to-door tool, and we use the word of mouth tool. We are using these types of tools because we are working as an institution, and in our context, an institution has have a lack of trust from marginalized communities. So now we're trying to create that link, that trust between the community and the institution. And that's the reason why we're thinking about the desk, the information desk, and we are doing a lot of workshops. And as I say, the door-to-door strategy is always the more useful, I think. And it's okay.
Thank you very much, Roberta. I don't know if Sarah, you also wanted to offer an answer? Yes.
Yes, maybe on the adaptation of the city. We worked a lot on the way that we can, how to say that, preserve the housing rights, the rights, fundamental rights of homeless in the city. And one part of this reflection was on the heat and the way they can protect themselves from heat, because we speak about homelessness during the winter, but there is also a lot of people dying in the street during the summer. And for example, in Paris, there is a big reflection on the way they can cool the city and open some spaces for people in general and homeless people in particular. And the example was to open public spaces to like library, more inclusive. It means that they train the people working in libraries to accept the fact that some people can come in the libraries even if they are homeless or if they just come to cool themselves. And they decided to let the nature, after the COVID, the nature goes up without cutting it, and they closed the streets. They are closing the street of school because they don't want cars to come in the street where there is some schools, and they put some a lot of trees around the schools to cool these spaces. And I think that they try to transform the outdoor spaces in the school to allow kids to have some fresh air when they go out. So there is a lot of little things like that, access to water for everyone, even spring water in Paris, with some free point of water, access to a shower for everyone, also free showers, and some spray of water in the different park of the city to let kids to refresh themselves with the spray of water. So I think that there is a lot of creativity in different cities, and we can find ideas with this.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I'm going to give the word to Simon for a final answer, and then I'm going to wrap it up.
Thanks a lot. No, just a very small add for the colleague who mentioned that there is a strong connection among communities and the part of summer energy poverty. I totally agree. Also in Cool Life experienced that part. We started doing, in fact, some single interviews with households, with citizens, and the answers were mostly, well, we don't have cooling, there's no money for that. We try to do natural ventilation, which means that they open different windows and provide basically a chimney effect, which could also lead in reality then to health problems. And so then we said, okay, we have to go away from the single interviews with single citizens and try also to experience a larger community, and what we did with an energy community in Italy. And the answer actually was basically to explore the possibility of a district cooling, you know, because the district cooling also provides an economically feasible option to provide cooling in many households. I just provide you an example for Vienna, for example. In Vienna, we have in middle in the city, we have a district heating and cooling system called Spittelau, and there basically waste is burned. And there's also cogeneration, so for electricity production. And in summer, when they burn waste, then this heat is then utilized for the heat-cold exchange. So basically with thermal-driven heat pumps, they generate cold water, which then is pumped in the radiators, which are given in every household. And so they can basically cool down the flats, because also in Vienna, which in summer is a desert, a concrete desert, I would say, it helps a lot. And as a student, I also was there and personally experienced it as a very cheap solution, and it worked out. So this could also be a direction to solve the issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that was a really interesting last edition. And I'm not going to wrap up with a lot of takeaways because we don't have a lot of time left. But I want to say just thank you very much for your attention and for engaging also with the online speakers. And thank you so much, Roberta and Sarah, for being here, and Simon as well. I think maybe the conclusion is simply that this is a really interesting problem for which as much communication between research and practice and policy is needed. So I really encourage you all to engage with each other and to take away everything that you can from this panel. So thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
For the people in the room, we're going to have a 20 minutes coffee break before we start next panel. Hello, everyone. We're going to kick off the last panel of the day. So, yeah, you're welcome to sit down.
Okay, so let's start with the last panel of the day and of the forum. It's just one last effort, people, so let's try to be ready to it. Okay, I'm Josep Babot from ESF, Engineering Without Borders in Barcelona, and today I will be the moderator of this panel, which I have coordinated with Emilie from Friends of the Earth Europe. This panel is called Global Energy Justice, Why It Matters and How to Work for It. And just, I will do like a very, very quick introduction, and then I will explain how it will work. The right to energy is inconceivable without taking the global south into account. The current European energy model is heavily dependent on imports of fuels such as gas and oil from third countries. Last year, for example, the EU imported 14% of its gas consumption from North African countries. This means 41 billion cubic meters. The current context of energy transition places dependence on imports of minerals such as lithium, copper, or nickel as a key element. This dependence on the part of the global north generates extractivist dynamics in the south. To learn more about this issue, we have invited these 4 speakers to delve into the impacts of our energy model from a global justice perspective. Today we will have Niccolò Vojevoda, also Lavinia Steinfort, Mahfoud Lamin, which will be with us online, and then Fabien Baudelet, who I think that he's late because of a train delay, and I hope that he will be joining us in the middle of the panel. The panel, we wanted to make it more dynamic, so we will start with a round of a question for each speaker, and they will have more or less from about 6-7 minutes to answer this question. We will do the 4 speakers, and then we will return to another round of questions and answers from about 5 minutes. So in total, they will have like 12 minutes interventions, and then we will open the floor to the audience here in order to do questions, doubts, and whatever. Okay. So the first speaker here is Niccolò. He is the Europe Regional Director at 350.org. Based in Ireland, he brings over a decade of experience in climate campaigning, organizing, mobilizing, and movement building with a strong focus on equity and justice. Currently, he's driving efforts to ensure the super rich pay up to help fix the climate crisis. Niccolò has been pivotal in launching and scaling the fossil fuel divestment movement in Europe. He also serves on the campaign steering committee of the Beyond Fossil Fuels Coalition and represents 350.org in the Right to Energy Coalition, championing a global just transition to renewable energy driven by people power. So the first question to Niccolò is, we know that 350.org is an organization with a presence on every continent and with campaigns that aim to impact both the global north and also the global south. In terms of energy, how do you think north? How do you link north and south?
Thanks, Joseph. Apologies for my voice, but I'm going to try to use all my remaining energy to talk with you today. Could I get the first slide up, please? And I just want to respond to your question, Joseph, by telling a bit of a story. A few years ago, at 350.org, we started working on a campaign. At the time, Total Energies was planning to build a pipeline in East Africa, going from Uganda to Tanzania, the East Africa crude oil pipeline. And if built, this pipeline would be the longest heated crude oil pipeline in the whole world. And obviously, this is a climate disaster, but not only that, it would be a disaster for local environment and local communities. So, as we do at 350, we have started building a coalition with local movement allies, communities, international NGO partners to stop it. And it gave birth to the Stop ECOP campaign. We would support the communities resisting the pipeline. We would try to cut international funding to it, and we would just broadly undermine political support for it. So far, so good. So it's a few weeks from the start of the campaign, and I do my first tweet about the campaign, and I'm feeling quite proud of it. I go to bed. The morning after, I wake up. And it turns out like I've gone somewhat viral in Uganda on Twitter, but unfortunately not for the right reasons. I wake up with a long list of responses along the lines of, who are you to tell that Uganda can't grow, Uganda's economy can't grow? Why is 350 anti-development? so Europe can get rich with fossil fuels, but people in East Africa can't. And it sort of like went on and on and on and on. Of course, we knew at the time that there were some pro-Ugandan government voices that were just pushing their propaganda. So there was we needed to take these messages with a pinch of salt. But at the same time, there was still truth in what we were hearing, and not just in response to my tweet, but we kept hearing through the campaign. We risked being perceived as a campaign with involvement of NGOs from rich Western countries that were just saying no to something, but were not really proposing an alternative model, an alternative approach. And I keep seeing evidence of that in a lot of anti-fossil fuel campaigning, a lot of pushback and a lot of the counter-narrative saying, you're saying no to this, but what is it that you're saying yes to? And the need to say yes to something is there when the local communities along the route of the pipeline do need to access energy for their needs. My colleagues were doing some field visits earlier in the year. They went to a village that was a small farming village. The farmers there had their ancestral farming land confiscated by Total, were paid very little for it, didn't have enough money to buy additional farming land, no electricity, no access to energy. That need continued to be unmet. In another village, interestingly enough, the company relocated every household in a different part of the country, built a whole new village for them, linked it to the electricity grid, and then was charging them so much in monthly bills that the communities couldn't pay, and they got disconnected after a few months. And I think there's only like one house out of 50 in that whole village that has still access to electricity. So the need is real. And so we started working with those communities along the route of the pipeline to build their skills, to build their agency, to build that alternative. And the aspiration is really to have, at least initially, around 100 community-led renewable energy projects along the route of the pipeline that are, sorry, can you just go back to the first slide, please? Yeah, thank you. So just building that alternative and campaigning for it. And we want to support the voices that are saying, we do want access to energy, but we don't just want to replace the same top-down, profit-driven colonial system with another. We want to take the driver's seat in that alternative. And this goes back to answering your question, Joseph, which is, how does this relate to us in Europe? And initially, the work that we did in Europe was very much mirroring what the struggle in East Africa was. So we knew that to stop ECOP in Europe, we needed to put pressure on Total. We needed to discredit the project, to stop. We needed to target the banks and the insurance companies that were backing it. But the struggle has changed. And it's still obviously paramount for us to stop Total and stop them from building this project. But we also need to figure out what role we have to play in supporting this wide rollout of renewable, affordable energy in East Africa. And that fight is a fight about money. Communities there have the will to transition. They have a need to access to energy affordably. They do want renewable energy, but just the resources to do so are not there. And so this is why for us in Europe, it is so important to own to our historical responsibility, get our governments to pay up. And if we could go forward 2 slides, please. Yes. And so just to conclude, earlier this year, we launched a campaign called Tax Their Billions. And the starting point is this: Despite what the far right might say, there's plenty of money for climate action and for the energy transition. And it's not going to hurt working people to take climate action. It should actually benefit working people. And more than that, we have enough money to benefit working people and give a right to access affordable energy in Europe and elsewhere. But right now that money is in the wrong pockets, and specifically it's in the pockets of fossil fuel companies who've kept making record profits through the last few years, and it's in the pockets of billionaires. So there's a political opportunity, particularly this coming year around the G20, and if there's enough pressure built from below, we can really shift governments to commit to shifting where the money goes. And if we do that, I really think we have a bigger chance to not just transition, but to make sure that communities are in the driving seat of the transition. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next speaker is Lavinia Steinfurt from the Transnational Institute. She's a political geographer and feminist. She is the coordinator of the TNI's Public Alternatives Project and the Public Power Files, authoring the 2023 Energy Transition Mythbusters Policy Brief, the 2023 Greens Multinationals Exposed Research, and the upcoming 2024 Reclaiming Energy Report. Her research covers remunicipalization of public services, a just transition towards energy democracy, and the finance strategies to get there, with the aim of strengthening coalition building across social movement groups. And the first question for her, we say that at the Transnational Institute, we know that you have been trying for some time now to connect the dots between struggles to deprivatize, decolonize, and democratize the energy model. Could you explain this campaign, its motives and results?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Joseph. And it's great to come after Nicolo. Yeah, to answer your question, I want to briefly dial back a little bit because, well, we surely all agree we need a fossil fuel phase out as it's fueling the genocide in Palestine, destroying the planet, harming people everywhere. But I think we first have to be very clear that this phase out is far from happening at this very moment, that profiteering as a core or even ultimate form of of extractivism is the reason for this, and which solution can really get us out of this mess on all scales, so from the local to the national to the global. This is why we put together the public power files, so we can go to the next slide. And this work we have been gathering with many comrades, allies across the globe, is really to, on the one hand, expose the business models, the market policies that are threatening, derailing the energy transition for many years and continuing to this day. And at the same time, really understand how, from real world experiences, public ownership, democratic control over the energy system can really be employed as our best shot to fight climate chaos and design a just transition. So on the next slide, you briefly see the 6 policy myths that we've been debunking, because for us, these are core in virtually every country and also determining our international transition policy. We can go to the next slide again, because I think it's useful to run you through the hard evidence we've been gathering, which is first and foremost that most of our energy today is produced and sold for a profit. On the one hand, yes, we see that renewables are growing because of, public funds securing those profits, basically, but also fossil fuels, as I implied, are still shamelessly peaking. And this is really all protected by a whole trade architecture involving investment protection like ISDS and patents, which should be understood as really neo-colonial tools to keep global South countries from sovereign development. And we kind of calculated the total of these profits for, let's say, 15 of the biggest green multinationals, and you can see those multinationals on the next slide. So in total, in just 7 years, they gobbled up over 175 billion. This is, of course, a very difficult figure to grasp, but basically it's more than 7 times all the real climate finance going from north to south. And basically, the bottom line of this research, and that is also in the Mythbuster piece, is really that these companies only invest in renewables when their profits are secured. The bottom line is basically that these private investors, they really take more public funds than they bring in themselves. So we can go to the next slide to give you really the most, I think one of the most controversial figures I have found recently out there that I think is really helping us to advocate for better public power, let's say. And well, of course, as was already shared, the transition, climate finance, it costs a lot, but that money is there. And at the moment, we do have a risk of using all that public money to protect private profits. And here you see a figure from a UN commissioned report that really calculated, if you really read closely, that it takes $4 in public funds for just $1 of private sector investment. And this is absolutely lethal across the African continent, across other global south regions, but it's actually also a reality. Even if it's to a lesser extent, the same dynamic plays out across Europe and across North America. So I think this is why this can be such a powerful and political target for global solidarity and organizing. So basically, we can go to the next slide to share a little bit more on the economics, which are so paradoxical when it comes to the energy transition, which is really that when prices fall, this has been pointed out by experts that this is inevitably leading to an energy transition. Lower prices means more renewables and so on. But actually, the opposite is quite true, because in a for-profit market model, lower prices means actually less profit margin. So as a result, investors have been pulling their money from renewables. And actually, in China, a country that is, whether we like it or not, but that is leading on energy transition, that situation where renewable subsidies were pulled, it led to a drop of 38% in renewable investments. In Germany, it was even higher, 46%. And this is a dynamic we see across the globe. And we have to grapple with the political economy of this. So basically, all this is just to provide the evidence of why even an international organization like the International Energy Agency is pointing out that only 6% of all the energy transition components are on track, are fully on track, only 6%. And actually, this same International Energy Agency is then providing headlines with saying, it's actually going quite well, and then just pointing to the increase in solar energy. But at the same time, if you look at their data and look at all the different components of the transition, it's actually a really bad situation we're in. And then we kind of came together, put all this kind of exposing of the problem together with the proposing of the alternative. We can go to the next slide, to really understand how better public ownership and democratic public power is really a solution that is not a silver bullet, but that can truly help us, that is helping public power struggles all over the world to do two things at the same, right? So cutting those fossil fuels and also increasing, ramping up those renewables. And as so far, still, I think many campaigns are focusing on either or, and we need to have a comprehensive strategy that actually can do both at the same time. So we're trying to connect these dots between struggles for decolonization, deprivatization, democratization, and have subdivided them in these three parts to really understand what I told before on the profit trap, what better public ownership could look like as groups are fighting for that underground, but also really to go beyond the state, because it's very legitimate that populations are critical of state ownership. We know, for example, Vattenfall, it's on the one hand also leading on renewables, also meaning big hydro, that is also a force that's doing a lot of bad and a lot of destruction, and we have to understand these state-owned companies and how they're acting like multinationals abroad to criticize that instead of seeing that as the solution just because it's state-owned, right? So how to put the public ethos at the center of democratic public ownership is, I think, key. And in order to connect all these struggles, we understand the global public goods approach as very important to really see how these dots could be connected between deprivatization, decolonization, and democratization. To just give you one example of what this looks like on the ground as we speak, we can go to the next slide. I understood that Ilyes Ben Ammar from Tunisia was also invited, and he's a great comrade of ours. So I just wanted to share the struggle by STEG and by the energy by the Working Group for Energy Democracy from Tunisia shortly, because I think it very concretely shows how these dimensions come together. So basically, the German energy agency GIZ set up shop in Tunis, in the government building, actually physically set up shop to dictate, to influence the renewable energy policies of Tunisia. As a result, private investors come in to grab the lands for solar energy, for renewables, to turn that into green hydrogen and export that to Europe. This is backed by a whole EU-wide agenda that is, like more broadly about extracting resources such as lands for cheap, then liberalizing those electricity systems, and then selling the technology very expensive back to those countries. So it's kind of a triple injustice. And the situation is luckily that trade unions have been organizing for a number of years and have been effective and successful to really halt these private renewables, which are really undermining sovereign development in the country. And so we should not be fooled by what these actors are doing in the name of an energy transition, because, ruthless exploitation is continuing. And they're not just fighting for these private renewables, actually advocating for a democratic public electricity system. So I just wanted to kind of end maybe the last 1 or 2 minutes with some concrete pathways we have been identifying, what we can have, what we can do in our various contexts. So we can go to the next slide. These are some kind of higher level learnings, but maybe more concretely, I think the first core pathway is to really kick out those profiteers, whether it's renewables, whether it's fossil fuels, because it goes expense of let's say, popular self-determination, really dismantle those fake free markets, because really renewables have been happening despite and not because of liberalization, and reverse those energy privatizations on all levels. And we can really replace public-private partnerships, which is a form of privatization, with public partnerships, which can happen between, for example, electricity utilities. So one example is, for example, partnership between water utilities. There's a lot to learn actually for our energy movements, climate movements, from the water justice struggles across the world. So this example, I think, is just very powerful because it shows international solidarity, where the Phnom Penh Cambodian public water utility actually helped in Vietnam to improvement of a local public water utility and operations, where because of this partnership, which really had equity, solidarity at its core and not profit making, it kind of benefited over 300,000 people, the lowest incomes of that city, and actually made these people pay 3 times less than they would have been paid to a private operator, just to give you a kind of dimension of what that looks like. And as I said, public ownership is not a holy grail, but we do have the figures that 9 out of 10 countries that are leading the energy transition have a public renewable energy company that's driving the process, and also that public ownership enables lower energy prices by up to 30%. So just in terms of the arguments are out there, and let's use them to make sure also that democratic decision-making is at its core. I think from there, we can really also advocate for progressive tariffs to really hone in on how to ensure energy is a right, is a human right, and an essential basic service, in order to reduce wasteful consumption, in order to defend essential use, like powering all the cleaning, cooking, and caring that's making the world go round. And to just give that one example, in Honduras, the first female president, Xiomara Castro, she actually got a law passed that ensures that energy is now provided on the basis of a public good. And this is part of the struggle against privatization and should benefit 900,000 people even. So there are actually big wins happening. And of course, that's never the end. A law in itself is not the goal, but it is an instrument to hold our governments accountable in order to really shape those struggles, shape those channels for accountable and transparent decision making. And maybe just to end with the example of Costa Rica, it's the next slide, which is one of the other public power struggles we feature in this Reclaiming Energy report. And it's really in order to avoid that corporate or even authoritarian capture that the state has also has been known for, is to put kind of like public community collaborations at the center of our governance models. And in Costa Rica, it's very interesting because they have a countrywide public system which involves a state-owned enterprise, ECE, but also regional municipal companies that operate more in the urban area. But then complementary to that, the rural parts of Costa Rica are get energy from massive democratic energy cooperatives. And what's so special about this example is that it's not on the basis of competition that this works. Actually, while we have competition between suppliers across Europe, in Costa Rica, there's a system like in Denmark to some extent where these public cooperative providers are working alongside and are backed by the state-owned electricity utility, which, you know, a utility is responsible for generation, for transmission, and then the local dimension comes in for the distribution and the supply. And we really have to make sure our analysis of the problem is on par with system alternatives. And I think, yeah, this is really helping us to think through what systems alternatives should look like on the ground. So I really will end soon because I want to also hear from the next speaker and of course everybody else in the audience. But because renewables really require such a, I want to say shitload, but just so much land to actually roll out all the solar and wind we need, we have to think of land justice at the same time. And I think on the next slide, I just wanted to close with connecting the struggle for public power and how that really should reinforce people's demands for self-determination, how to make sure that public renewables are not pitted against the rights of rural, indigenous, and other racialized people. And I think the struggle for a free Palestine and a global energy embargo on Israel is really that most urgent case in point, I think, to sewer ties with fossil fuels and colonialism. And yeah, I think that's really the priority, to support that at the moment.
Thank you very much. In the second round of questions, we will talk more about the Palestine situation with Lavinia. So thank you for this inspiring intervention. Our next speaker is Mahfoud from Novact and Western Sahara is Not For Sale platform. Mahfoud is a Sahrawi political and human rights activist, born, raised, and currently living in the Sahrawi refugee camps in Tindouf, Algeria. He is a member of various Sahrawi local groups holding international advocacy responsibilities. His main focus is supporting Sahrawi human rights defenders in the occupied territories of Western Sahara. He has also been researching and campaigning against multinational companies illegally operating in Western Sahara. So our first question for Mahfoud is the following. In early October, the EU Court of Justice struck down the EU's fisheries and trade agreements with Morocco for, among other issues, violating the principle of self-determination. Can you share with the public the particular context of Western Sahara and energy extractivism?
Okay. Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, perfectly.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Thank you for the invitation and for having me with you today in this panel. I think we have had some of the context on when it comes to just energy transition, and I think the transition is happening slowly. However, it's not being just so, and especially for the peoples of and the countries of the South are really suffering from this same colonial practices for this shift from fossil fuel to renewable energy. And one of the cases is our case, of course, one of Western Sahara, which is still a territory under the colonization process, and who the people are still fighting for the very basic right of self-determination. But at the same time, many fights are happening simultaneously, including this fight against multinational companies, but also this fight against this unjust transition that is happening, for example, in the context of Western Sahara, against the wishes and the wills of the Sahrawi people. And regarding and answering your question, I think it's very relevant that you raised the issue of the final ruling of the EU Court of Justice, because Sahrawis have been fighting in the legal sphere for more than 10 years now, and different sentences have been issued by the EU Court of Justice particularly. However, the last one is very significant and is very important because it sets the ground. It's definitive. It's the final one. It comes after several appeals, particularly held or done or presented by the EU Commission and several states of the European Union. But this one is significant because it's final, so no further appeals are allowed now, and it sets the very basic legal ground when it comes to Western Sahara and importing products from Western Sahara, but also engaging in business with Morocco when covering or including the separate and non-self-governing territory of Western Sahara, because that's the terminology of the Western Sahara when it comes to international law. So the ruling of the 4th of October is very important, because for us, especially for civil society organization, that we have been fighting against the implications of multinational companies in our land, and especially those plundering our natural resources. I think it sets a very important ground to take these same companies to justice at the European level, and it consolidates also the legal basis of the Western Sahara question as a question of decolonization, and that the Sahara people should have the right to self-determination. So I will just unpack very briefly the most significant part of this ruling. But I think for this discussion is very important for us because, as I said, it will, it's opening a new pathway for us to basically hold companies accountable, and especially those who are trying to what we call greenwash the Moroccan occupation to Western Sahara, and those companies who are trying to sell their activities in Western Sahara as ecologic friendly, but also as green activities. So I think this ruling, the 4th of October ruling, says clearly that the people of Western Sahara is the third party. This means that any agreements concluded between the European Union and Morocco should, and that includes Western Sahara, which is a different and distinct territory, should have the green line. It means the clearly the consent of the Sahrawi people for this agreement. And we have seen how the EU Commission and the European Union in general have been violating the right of the Sahrawi people to give their consent of any economic operation that affects their land. And all the agreements that have been concluded between the EU and Morocco have not taken into consideration the Sahrawi people. And when I speak about the Sahrawi people, it's the Sahrawi people in its totality. We have half of our people living in the occupied territories, but we don't forget that because of this occupation in 1975, thousands of Sahrawis have fled their lands and are living now as refugees, including myself and my family. So this right of consent have been clearly violated in the different deals that have been concluded between the EU and Morocco. And the EU Court of Justice is saying now that this consent is very needed for any agreement. And also, the ruling sets clearly that the Western Sahara and Morocco are two distinct and separate territories. This means that any agreement concluded between Morocco and the European Union cannot include Western Sahara because it's a distinct and separate territories. And this ruling, also says that the agreements that have been concluded between the EU and Morocco, and that illegally includes Western Sahara, violate the Sahrawi people's rights to self-determination. So we are clearly, we're clearly seeing one of the most important victories for Sahrawis in terms of the battle for the sovereignty over natural resources, but the battle also on the fight for Sahrawis for the right to self-determination. And as I said before, and probably will speak about this more in details in my second intervention, but I said this sets a very important ground for us, for activists, but also for civil society organizations to hold these companies accountable and to see what legal avenue we can see in Europe, because this ruling will affect and is applicable to all EU member states, to hold those companies who are plundering our natural resources, but also they are constructing projects, big new energy projects in our land without taking the consent and for the Sahrawi people, and without any benefits for these people who are starving and who live in a very difficult situation, including suffering from a very systematic human rights abuses. So we will seek how we can best make the best use of this ruling. And I think it's important to mention that many European companies, of course, will be basically the very first target of this let's say next legal steps by Sahrawis against companies who are looting their natural resources. And as I said, in terms of the energy and how this affects the Sahrawis in the ground, I'll probably elaborate more on later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing this important ruling and its consequences. While we wait for Fabien, who I hope he will arrive before ending this panel, if you agree, we will continue with the second round of interventions, and then if he arrives, he will have the floor to do the first, to answer the first question. So we will start with a second round of questions, and I will ask the speakers to answer them if they want, or to comment on other interventions if that happened earlier in the panel. So my second question to Nicolo. It's what are the main challenges in the current context of energy transition from a global justice perspective? And you will have like about 5 minutes to answer it.
Thanks. Well, first, I think I want to pick up on a topic that you also touched on, Lavinia, which is finance. So some of the data that we looked at shows that clean energy spending globally is around $1.7 trillion a year. And if you exclude China, which is its own case, only 15%, so 15% of that goes to countries in the global south. And I think when we're talking about the challenges to the transition, I think that's a key one right there. The money's not flowing. The money is clearly not flowing from a private finance perspective. I think, the numbers that you mentioned, but also, I think last week I read a World Change International report saying something similar, for every dollar of public finance mobilized for the transition, private finance adds up like 80 cents. Whereas, in the rhetoric of our European governments, it looks like if you put €1, you can get 10 as a result, with all of this, fantastic private finance coming up to the rescue, which is fantasy. And then not to forget, even when the finance is public, the money almost always doesn't come in the form of grants. It comes in the form of loans. So countries like low and middle income countries in the global south, already with a huge debt to us richer countries, have to pay even more interest to be able to borrow for the transition, for building renewable energy, for giving right to access. And when they do go to the private market for that borrowing, the cost of borrowing is so much higher than, let's say, if a community energy group in Munich wanted to borrow from a Deutsche Bank. They just get so much more unfavorable deals than we do in richer countries. So I think that part of the thing that we need to do in Europe is definitely to not just push for the amounts of money to be significantly higher in public finance, but also the type of money that needs to come out of rich countries needs to be grants or grants equivalent, because finance, as those multinationals that you mentioned, works for a profit, and it is not profitable to provide universal energy access to everyone. There are cases that definitely need to be covered by public finance as well. So it's important to push our governments to cancel the debt, to do more public finance and more grants. And then the other challenge that I would mention is around, I would kind of call it civil society infrastructure. And I'm just mentioning that because we're trying to do something about that. So it's useful to come up with a challenge, but also what we could do about it. In Europe, there's such a wealth of frameworks and networks when it comes to, say, community energy. It's not the case in other parts of the world. Here you have Rescoop, you have a handy manual of how to build your community energy project. You have hundreds of examples across the region. It's much harder when we talk with our colleagues in communities across Latin America, Africa, the Pacific, how to get that up and running. So identifying that need earlier this year, we also launched another project which we call Our Own Power. And what we're trying to do is we try to connect people who do want to take people-owned energy in their own hands, and we're connecting them with each other, the skills that they need to do so, and the agency and the mutual support in a network. So we run webinars, we bring them together, and we're actually bringing them physically together in person in April next year. We're organizing an event for 250 people from across the global south in Brazil. We call it Renew Our Power. And we're trying to give a bit of a boost to this kind of like wave of people-powered community energy campaigning. And we hope to build more of those kinds of networks outside of Europe.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've been informed that Fabien will not be able to come finally, so you can spend more time if you want with your answers from now on, because we've got like 15 minutes left. Okay, so our second question for Lavinia, and remembering that on the final slide of her presentation, it was the Palestinian situation. So we just wanted to ask that, well, you have recently published the Free Palestine series. In the Palestinian context, how do you connect the current occupation with the energy issue?
Yeah, thanks for this question. It's mainly my colleagues Hamza Hamouchene and Abbé Taylor, Neve Rayan, that have been doing this amazing work on Palestine with Palestinian organizations at TNI. And yeah, to briefly share what this work has been about. On the one hand, it's to really historicize the genocide, to historicize the state, the settler colonial state of Israel, and the liberation struggle of Palestine. And I just want to recall a quote that I learned about in some of these readings. It's from the US Secretary of State under Nixon, so a few decades back. His name was Alexander Haig, and he called Israel the largest American aircraft carrier in the world that cannot be sunk. It does not even have one American soldier, but it's located in this critical region for American national security. And I think this kind of sums it up, how Israel is, as an European American settler colony in the Middle East, is really an imperial advanced outpost of the US, of European powers. And to kind of briefly then zoom in on the intersections between Palestine and the struggle for climate justice. First, I think it really shows the ugliness of colonial capitalism and its tendencies towards huge, brutal violence on large scales. The second intersection that I think is key is really that this is not just a genocide, but that it's actually more an ecocide and a holocide, where we see the annihilation, the complete annihilation of a social ecological fabric. And in just the first, which is the third intersection, in just the first 2 months after October 7th, the emissions because of this war was equal to 20 countries, the emissions of 20 countries in their whole year. So in terms of fighting emissions, we have to fight the defense industries, the war machine, and so on. And because of all this, I think we cannot dissociate kind of the struggle against capitalism and against US-led imperialism from the struggle against against Israel and for a free Palestine. And maybe to make it a bit more tangible, this region, the Middle East, where Israel and Palestine are located, it still is 35% of all oil production worldwide is happening there. So the strategic interests are still very, very big. And ever since October 7th, we see a number of gas licenses being provided by Israel to companies in international waters, which is illegal under international law. There have been kind of energy deals in the making between Israel and Jordan and Egypt and Cyprus, respectively. And to put also October 7th in perspective, this should be understood in direct response to the normalization deals that have been happening. The normalization deal was already in the 80s with the Camp David Accords, and most recently in 2020, Trump brokered the Abraham Accords, which was between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, between Israel and Bahrain, with Sudan, with Morocco, and actually just before the brutal attack happened on October 7th, there was a similar deal in the making between Israel and Saudi Arabia under patronage of the United States. So I think it's to kind of see the common thread here. I think the struggle for again popular sovereignty and self-determination is absolutely core to the climate struggle, to climate just solutions, as it is core to a free Palestine. And I think this is what what we have in common, and what also, of course, our comrade from Western Sahara was pointing out. So some of the work that my colleagues have been doing is really to also uncover the histories of solidarity between the struggle for Palestine, with the struggle against the war in Vietnam, against the struggle for decolonizing Algeria, the struggle, bottom-up struggle in Sudan that is happening as we speak. And I hope also uncovering the solidarities between Palestine and Western Sahara will be in the future something that can be shared. And in terms of not being blind also for the huge authoritarian state-owned oil companies that are in the Arab Peninsula, making even more profits than the figures I just shared. We have to grapple with and stand up for Palestine against Israel to also topple those regimes. And that is really, I think, a struggle in concert. So to end again with the embargo for Palestine, the global energy embargo against Palestine, as you may know, but I think is very hopeful that we can pull strength and energy from, is that because of organizing by mine workers, by indigenous communities in Colombia, the Petro administration of Colombia actually decided to cut all coal transport to Israel, which was really, I think, about 60% of all the coal going to Israel that is fueling the genocide. And I think as European energy and climate movements, it's our responsibility to keep on pushing our EU institutions to do the same and cut those energy transfers. And I will stop, but if there's time at the end, I would love to build on Nicolo's words on JETPs, on this, like just energy transition partnerships, which is supposed to move countries like South Africa and Vietnam and so on away from coal. But as was already shared, these are depth-based, and I think, there's more there that might be useful, and also the dimension of community energy. But I will leave that now and give back to you.
Okay, thank you very much. The second question for Mahfoud, returning to the CJEU ruling, we wanted to know what effects do you think it may have for energy companies from the global north that see Western Sahara as a business opportunity, and what has been your task from the organizations that opposed this model?
Thank you again, Josep. Thank you, Lavinia. I think it's very important also to highlight the work that have been done by 10A in terms of bringing information and data. I particularly here would like to thank my friend Hamza Hamoushan, who have been very involved in trying to unpack some of the details on this energy transition that is happening, and particularly with focus on the north of Africa. He has also wrote with some other experts about the green colonialism in Western Sahara and its relation with all what you have been mentioning, the normalization process. I always say, and in my conversations with my colleagues and friends in Palestine, that it's time where we see the oppressing unite and learn and exchange experiences. We have seen how Morocco in the last years have been getting a lot of skills, but also material, including military material to attack and to oppress the Sahrawis. I think it's also time for us as civil society, as the oppressed peoples, to unite and to share experiences, but to come together and to have similar spaces in order to speak about common fights, and also what are the different tactics that we should use, because we have no other option than to resist, and we only have to have that in order to continue. We have, of course, justice in our side, but we need to be stronger. So as I said, I think we as Sahrawi civil society particularly, we are trying to prepare for the new phase of struggle against companies, multinational companies that are present in Western Sahara and mainly benefiting from the resources of Western Sahara, because as you know, Western Sahara is rich in phosphates, but fish as well, and this is why there is this kind of deals between the EU and Morocco, where the majority of the resources, the biggest part comes from the occupied territory of Western Sahara, and we have other, of course, resources. But in terms of energy, Western Sahara has become for Morocco a hub, a very interesting hub. Actually, now 3 of the 5 big projects that that Morocco is conducting for renewable energy are being done in occupied land of Western Sahara, and this is where it starts to be controversial and it starts to be problematic. And of course, as Sahrawis, we have no problem with the transition, the energy transition. We totally support that people should, of course, try to find this kind of voice, but the process needs to be just and needs to take into consideration the problems of the local communities, and in this case of the Sahrawi communities, like as I said before, they have never been consulted. The companies and the businesses that they come to do business in Western Sahara, they never take into consideration the consent of the Sahrawi people. And more than that, we have seen how in the recent months many Sahrawis have denounced what we call land appropriation, which is an attack against Sahara and the demolition against Sahrawi houses, against Sahrawi's properties, for the sake of constructing new farms and new spaces for businesses and for companies that are coming to invest in the territory. So we have seen, and we are now working on a report about this with colleagues from the occupied territories, and it's becoming very aggressive, especially probably because of the ruling. We don't know why, but there are many companies that have been involved in this, and I think it's very important also to name and shame, and this is what we have been doing on Western Sahara is not for sale from our beginning, because we have established this campaign. It's also important to say that we have been inspired by the Palestinian BDS. So we have established this campaign or this platform in order to raise the voice of the Sahrawi civil society, but also make visible the demands of the Sahrawis who are under occupation in the occupied territories, because they don't have much voice. So we wanted to amplify a bit what they're going through, but particularly in order to do some advocacy and local and direct international direct action against multinational companies. In this context, in Western Sahara is not for sale. We have started particularly campaigning against Siemens and its subsidiary Siemens Gamesa, who are two, let's say, one big European company who have been long investing in Western Sahara. And when we speak about energy, I mean, all the energy projects that are being undertaken in occupied Western Sahara, we have Siemens and Siemens Gamesa present in this project. We have also some other companies such as the Italian Enel, but we, as Western Sahara is not for sale, we have been putting the focus more on Siemens, and all the responses we have got from Siemens and Siemens Gamesa is neglecting our wishes and our demands. And I think it might end up to get, taking Siemens and Siemens Gamesa to courts, and especially as I have mentioned before, now we have a very strong basis that have been consolidated with the final ruling of October the 4th of the European Court of Justice. But I think it's very important to put a name also to those companies who are investing and who are greenwashing, because this have been, the name of our main company. Stop greenwashing occupation, because what has been happening in Western Sahara by those companies is greenwashing and normalizing a situation that is not normal. We all know that Western Sahara has a special legal status, which is that it's under occupation. It's a non-self-governing territory, but we also know that Western Sahara is a closed and blocked territory that no international observers, no media have been allowed to enter for the last more than 10 years. So in this way, we are trying to give a sense of normalcy by investing in Western Sahara, or by bringing business and accepting projects and being involved in profit in Western Sahara, is making a sense of normalcy of these states of occupation, while what we should be doing is denouncing publicly this, and at least not being involved. So this is what we are putting in the table. These have been our major demands and our major claims, and we have been trying to engage as much international solidarity movement and civil society to engage, to put more pressure inside Europe particularly, but in other places, on companies like Siemens Gamesa and like Siemens, like Enel, among others, because we have a very big list of companies that are doing business in Western Sahara, and particularly on the renewable energy. And we have been going to COPs for the last few years, particularly also to denounce that we as Sahrawis have been excluded from the international talks about climate change, despite the fact that this climate change is affecting us directly, both in the occupied territories, but here, even in the refugee camps. So we don't have any access to these negotiations and to these talks, but we also are excluded from the finance when it comes to the damage caused by climate change. So we as Sahrawis, because we are not recognized as a member state of the UN, we are not part of the UNFCCC, so we have been also excluded from the finance mechanisms in order to mitigate all the risk that we are facing because of the climate change. So, and these companies, what they are trying to sell is that Western Sahara is part of Morocco because they are doing their project in Western Sahara. They, as I said, the greenwash situation, which is not normal, and they are consolidating a military occupation that have been going for more than 50 years now. So it's very important, as I said, as international solidarity movement, to engage also and then to understand better, because Sahrawis have been silenced. There is a lot of imposed silence on Sahrawis, especially in the occupied territories. It's very important to try to be their voices outside, but also to get to understand a bit the complexity of the issues. And at the same time, let's also make more pressure on those companies who are trying to normalize and to take profit of a situation of occupation where various and grave human rights violations are taking place. So I have listed some of them, but we have many others. And as I said, we have put the target by doing some direct action and some advocacy against these companies. But so far, they of course are not caring too much about the situation, and they are there to make business and to make profit, and they don't care about the process, they don't care about the people, and they don't care about that they are being involved in a problematic situation. So I think as civil society, as I said, we need to unite, and especially for the question of Western Sahara and for the business happening in Western Sahara, because there is not much seen about this. We have been suffering from silence, but also lack of information from the ground. And this is why I've appreciated a lot the work that has been done by TNA and particularly Hamza, because at least we have some of the information that is coming from the ground, and where we have a very clear complicity and where we have very clear violation of international law and of European laws, and also a very clear attempt of normalizing an abnormal situation. So I know probably I have gone beyond my time, but this is at the end, it's just an invitation also for you, for all the audience, in order to try to to find more information, but also, if possible, be engaged in more action against these complicities and against these violations that are happening in Western Sahara in particular, but I think in the global South in general by companies particularly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mahfoud. I think it's 12:05, so I don't know if we can count on 5-10 minutes, to participate. So if you want to share something, do some questions, doubts, I don't know.
I'm not going to say very much actually, because we know what's going on, and we're all sitting in the room, and on many subjects, on these subjects, perhaps on other subjects not, we know what's going on. And we might, it's greed and power. I mean, we need the evidence, we need to write it down, we need to have a critical detail on it, but we all know what this problem is. If we don't know about other problems, we know about this problem. And it's this problem, not other problems, that are devouring our world and our lives. Right. So the G20, the heart of the monster, the greedy monster, the sociopathic, psychopathic monster that only wants to eat everything up and leave nothing for nearly everybody. There's no generosity. A psychopathic monster. And that metaphor is very applicable. It's not dystopian. It's not fantasy. It's not science fiction. There are all types of human beings in the world, some with high empathy, some with low empathy, and even those with low empathy, and even those who, all right, I'll come to the question, sorry. Sorry, thank you. So, the big question, I think, when it comes to change, how we transform, how do we go to the heart of the big monster? What do we do in relation to the heart of the financialized system, the G20, and so on? Do we follow the same strategy? Do we perpetrate's not really the right word, activate the same tactics? Or do we change tactics and strategy? But I think everything is financially integrated. Everything is financially vertically integrated to such an extent that it's possibly never been. So do we go for this? Do we go for the heart of this vertically integrated, let's face it, unstable skyscraper? Because with vertical integration, when they say the pound is strong, when they say the dollar is strong, we know that strong is not, it doesn't mean strong. It means it's brittle and it's capable of breaking. And perhaps it needs breaking, but how do we do, I suggest we go for the G20, or how do we go about that? Sorry, that's not a question. So I've said everything anyway, so I'm not even going to turn it into a question. I'll ignore formality. Sorry about
that. Is there any other question? I don't know if you want to answer that more or less, because I think that it was a question indeed. It was talking about strategies and how to face it, right? So if you want.
Yes, so I think first, I think you started talking about we know what this is greed and power. And actually I had a similar reflection as I was listening to what we were saying, how much a struggle for energy is a struggle for power. Energy is power, energy is control. And, the example of, the example of the Israeli military smashing the solar panels in the Palestinian village from earlier this year came to mind. Like, who has access and who can give energy has power. And so I think this struggle is about the access to energy, it's about renewables, decarbonization, but ultimately it's a struggle about shifting back the power from the multinationals, the governments, like back into the hands of the people. And I think for me, a key, like at the moment from an economical perspective, I think the key thing to shift is this sense of like scarcity. I think this is, when our rich European country governments have gone into the UN climate summit in Azerbaijan last month, they came with very little money on the table because, their argument is, times are tough. We don't have much money to spend in our budgets. We can't provide that much in climate finance. And I think unless that fundamentally shifts and like the cultural mindset of like, actually, no, like we do have the money, we call ourselves rich countries for a reason. I think that we're never going to get to where we need to be. And I think for that, there needs to be demand built up from below. I think for that demand to be there needs to be a vision. What does this alternative energy system look like? So we need to reimagine the energy system, and it has to do with, energy democracy. But I think importantly, we need to make sure that whatever our alternative is as NGOs, academics, civil society, is something that has material benefits for people. I think that there's a limited extent to which, like climate organizations like mine can go and be like, we need to shift to, we need to retrofit buildings because, it's lowering emissions. And I think we really need to like tap into like what is relevant, what are people's real needs. And I think if we do that, and if we build up their agency to make a difference about that, and if we start connecting all these things together, then I think we have a chance to shift things. But yeah, it's a long way to go.
Yeah, I will try to be brief. I think the issue on finance, which was already touched on, and that I think you also kind of highlighted, and the finances of climate solutions, the finances of a whole transition, I think is really something that will be much more even at the center at the Brazil COP in Berlin, the G20 and so on. And I think it would be valuable, and T and I will try to make a contribution there in the coming year and years, to really understand how the solutions, because talk of solutions is the frames and the concepts from the global north are really dominating the international debates, and which finance solutions have been proposed from global south contexts, and how to evaluate those, how to learn from the ones in the past, how to do a kind of systematic review of what have gone before us, where we are now, what's on the table in terms of financing alternatives, seems very urgent. To take an example of Korea in Ecuador, the previous president who called for a cancellation of debt to stop oil extraction in the Yasuni protected park, and this kind of global climate finance did not come about, and they continued extraction until a recent referendum. And now we have Petro that is calling for debt for nature swaps, which also has huge risks to it, right? In terms of commodifying nature, which many of these quote unquote green multinationals are also doing. But just to really grapple with what is effective of these proposals, what can popular movements on the ground kind of support, and how to turn it in the right direction in order for it not to be co-opted, as many things are. So I think that would be great to work with you on, to support this collectively. The other dimension I want to end with is on community energy, and I think there is a lot of organizing going around for community energy. So we really have to build on that and acknowledge what's happening on that front. At the same time, we also have to be honest against ourselves that small community energy projects are at the moment going bankrupt because they are outcompeted by big business. So if we don't fight that bigger market system, community energy will not be viable, even though I would love it to be, right? It's not that I'm personally against small-scale solutions. It's just that how can we make sure we have a system-wide, country-wide system that's actually operating for ensuring energy is treated as a human right and so on, in order to actually make those community initiatives thrive. And also, if we have to really think of degrowing the energy system, our emissions, especially in Europe, then we have to really see how those community energy systems can be connected, how they can be supported by a national grid, and in order to work on the principle of collaboration instead of competition, going back to the example of Costa Rica. So I will end there, but yeah, I think we have to reckon with the role of the state. It's not pretty, it's a ugly creature very often, but if we don't do that, we won't have viable proposals on the table to make them work and to hold our governments accountable. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. There is an intervention there. I don't know if Laia will kill me for it. Yeah, it's okay.
Thank you. Hi, good morning. My name is Julian. I'm working for a French NGO called JRS. We specialize in access to energy and climate. I think it was very interesting, and for most of what's been said, I completely share your views. Although I think there are one thing that brings a little bit of confusion when we talk about global energy justice. On the one hand, you have the extraction of energy resources for the, say, global north at the expense of the global south, to put it short, and that is one part. And it should be, I think, considered separately from the issue of human rights and energy access in the global south. In your presentations, there is a mix-up, and I think that's a little bit confusing. And to present that to people which might be a bit less familiar with the topic might be useful, just me saying. And I'm not specialized at all about energy extraction for the north. That's not what I'm working with, but I'm a bit more familiar with the energy access issues. I think the issue is very, very complex. And although I do agree with a lot of points that's been made, and sorry, it's not really a question, it's more just remarks and comments, but on the one hand, yes, big corporates have a role in the overall failure or not so successful universal energy access. But on the one hand, you were just saying that, small-scale energy providers are getting bankrupt because of big businesses. Well, to a certain extent, yes. To another extent, there are a lot of other factors. If we're talking about small-scale decentralized energy, microgrids and the like, even the big corporates now, they do pour money into it because they see a business prospect in the future. But at the time, there is almost no microgrid that is profitable in the south. And yes, of course, the big businesses can still pour money into it, whereas the smaller ones do not have the financial resources to maintain it. But none of them almost is actually profitable at the time being. So I think it should be mentioned. On the other hand, when we speak about big electricity utilities, it is worth mentioning that in many countries they are state-owned, not privately managed, and they are ill-managed for sure, very highly subsidized, providing a service that is very unsatisfying and at a cost that doesn't cover the actual electricity production. And I think it would be useful to add a little bit of nuance when we speak about the energy sector, because well, that helps also figure out all the challenges that are there. And although I completely share your views about the issues posed by big corporate in this sector, there are many others that needs to be factored in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we could open a huge debate after this intervention, but we have to end here. So I invite you to continue this debate once the forum is closed. So thank you very much for your attention, and I think that it was a good opportunity to integrate the global justice perspective into this forum, and not forgetting the global south and the impacts of our energy model into these countries. So thank you very much.
I just wanted to take the floor one more time to just wrap it up. I just wanted to say many, many thanks for the speakers today, for the people that attended today, that these are the... What? Okay, sorry. I feel very, very happy that we've had all these sessions, very insightful. We've covered a lot of topics, so it's very difficult for me to kind of like wrap it all together. But maybe two things that have been a constant in all the different sessions, from the session that we have today on global energy justice to the one that we kicked off the forum with about the implementation, the socially just implementation of the Fit for 55, I would say is the community. We've spoke a lot about community energy, but also about like the importance to bring the voices of the different communities, to unite the communities, to make sure that we actually like build the power. And I think this is very important, this sense of community collaboration, working together in solidarity in front of the increasing competitiveness narrative that is coming now at the EU level. And just the other thing that has been mentioned in all of the panels that won't surprise anyone is finance. And yeah, it's I think in front of this scarcity narrative that is also increasing, in front of the austerity measures that might that are coming in back in Europe, it's very important to kind of like highlight that the money is there. We need redistribution. We need better allocation of public finance and actually like steer from the private financing too. But yeah, just wanted to highlight these two things, and many thanks for coming and for being the brave ones that stayed till the very end of the forum. So yeah, thanks a lot, and hope that we can keep on the discussions. Thank you.